The fluorescent lights of Morrison's grocery hummed overhead as I pushed my cart down the cereal aisle. My daughter Emma's small hand tucked safely in mine. At 7 years old, she had my dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. A reminder of everything I'd built and everything I'd lost. "Mommy, can we get the one with the marshmallows?" Emma's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I glanced at the colorful box, then at the generic brand beside it. $3 difference. $3 meant choosing between her wanting marshmallow cereal or me having lunch tomorrow at work. "How about we get the honey one instead? Remember how you said it tasted like sunshine?" Emma's face brightened. Crisis averted. These tiny negotiations had become my daily mathematics, balancing her childhood joy against the brutal reality of our bank account. That's when I heard it. That particular pitch of voice that signals gossip, the kind meant to be overheard. Can you imagine? Showing up to the spring gala like that. Linda Crawford's voice carried across 2 aisles. She was wearing the same dress from last year. The same dress? Well, what do you expect? That was Diane Foster, her perpetual companion in judgment. Single mother, working at that little boutique downtown. I heard she can barely keep the lights on. My hand tightened on the cart handle. Emma looked up at me, confused by my sudden stillness. "Do they mean you, Mommy?" "No, sweetheart, just some ladies talking." But we both knew they did. Linda and Diane had been fixtures in Riverside since before I was born. Their husbands ran successful businesses, their children attended private schools, and their opinions shaped the social landscape of our small town like weather patterns, predictable, sometimes harsh, and impossible to escape. I'd known them my whole life. Linda used to babysit me when I was Emma's age. Diane had been my mother's bridge partner before Mom passed. But that was before Marcus left, before the divorce papers arrived via courier, before I became the cautionary tale mothers whispered to their daughters, "Don't end up like Sarah Mitchell." "I heard Marcus is engaged now," Linda continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "to that lawyer from Portland. Beautiful woman. Successful. They're planning a wedding at the Riverside Manor." The Riverside Manor, the venue where Marcus and I had gotten married 9 years ago, when I was 23 and stupid enough to believe in forever. Poor Sarah, Diane sighed theatrically, raising that little girl all alone. No man wants to take on another man's child, especially when there's so much baggage. Emma tugged my sleeve. "What's baggage, Mommy?" "Just something people carry when they travel, baby." But I knew what they meant. I was the baggage. The failed marriage, the tiny apartment above Chin's dry cleaning, the 10-year-old sedan with the check engine light permanently glowing, all of it marked me as lesser in their eyes. I finished our shopping in silence, my chest tight with familiar shame. At the checkout, I counted exact change while the cashier waited with barely concealed impatience. Behind me, I felt the weight of judgmental stares from the growing line. This was my life now. Every purchase scrutinized, every choice weighed, every moment a reminder that I'd fallen from grace in a town that never let anyone forget their failures. The boutique where I worked, Threads and Treasures, occupied a narrow storefront between a coffee shop and a used bookstore. Mrs. Chen, my landlord and employer, had given me the job 3 years ago when I was desperate and drowning. She paid me fairly, more than fairly, actually, but fairly doesn't stretch far when you're the sole provider for a growing child. "Sarah, dear, you look troubled," Mrs. Chen said that afternoon, her wise eyes studying me over her reading glasses. At 72, she moved through the shop like a bird, quick and knowing. "Just tired, Mrs. Chen." "Tired, yes, but also carrying heavy thoughts." She patted my hand. "The weight we carry inside is often heavier than any load we lift with our hands." I smiled despite myself. Mrs. Chen had a saying for everything, each one seemingly custom-made for my exact situation. The bell above the door chimed, and my stomach dropped. Linda Crawford swept in, followed by Diane and 2 other women from their social circle, Jessica Worthington and Pamela Shore. The 4 horsewomen of Riverside. Emma called them once, having overheard me venting to my sister on the phone. "Sarah," Linda's smile was sharp as broken glass, "just the person I needed to see. We're organizing the spring charity auction, and we need volunteers for setup. You're good with manual labor, aren't you?" The implication hung in the air like smoke. Manual labor, the work beneath them, is suitable for someone of my station. "I'll check my schedule," I said evenly. "Oh, and Sarah." Diane leaned against the counter, examining her manicured nails. "I saw Marcus last week. He looks wonderful. Marriage must agree with him. His new wife is lovely. Did you know she graduated from Harvard Law? They're already talking about having children." The words were designed to wound, and they found their mark. Marcus and I had wanted more children. I'd had 2 miscarriages before Emma, 1 after. The grief had built a wall between us that neither of us knew how to climb, until one day he simply walked around it and into someone else's life. "I'm happy for him," I said, and meant it. The anger had faded years ago, replaced by exhaustion and the constant hum of survival. "Are you?" Jessica spoke up, her voice laced with curiosity. "I mean, he left you with nothing. That must sting. Watching him build a new life while you're here." "I have Emma." "That's nothing." Linda laughed, a crystalline sound that made my teeth ache. "Of course, dear. Though I suppose that's cold comfort when you're eating ramen for dinner again." They didn't know about the ramen. That was the terrifying part. They were guessing, throwing darts in the dark that somehow kept hitting bullseyes after they left. Trailing expensive perfume and casual cruelty, Mrs. Chen emerged from the back room. "Poisonous flowers," she said softly. "Beautiful on the outside, toxic at the roots." "They're just being honest," I said, fighting the burn behind my eyes. "Everything they said is true. Truth can be spoken with kindness or with knives. They choose knives." Mrs. Chen squeezed my shoulder. "But remember, my dear, the tallest trees face the strongest winds, yet their roots run deepest." I wanted to believe her, but standing in that small boutique, wearing my clearance rack cardigan and discount shoes, I felt more like a sapling than a tree. That evening, Emma and I walked home through Riverside's tree-lined streets. Spring had painted the town in pastels, cherry blossoms drifting like pink snow, daffodils nodding in garden beds, the river reflecting the golden hour sun like molten glass. It was beautiful. It was home. And it was slowly crushing me. "Mommy, why were those ladies mean to you at the store?" I'd hoped she'd forgotten. 7-year-olds notice everything and forget nothing. Sometimes people say things without thinking, baby. But they were thinking. I could tell by their faces. They wanted to hurt you. The perception stole my breath. When had my daughter become so observant? When had she started reading the cruelty in adult interactions? "People sometimes feel better about themselves by making others feel small," I said carefully. "But that says more about them than about us." "Are we small, Mommy?" We'd reached our apartment. The stairs creaked under our feet. The hallway smelled of cooking oil and old carpet, and our door needed repainting. But inside, Emma's drawings covered the refrigerator. Her books lined makeshift shelves, and photos of us, laughing, hugging, being filled every available surface. "No, sweetheart, we're exactly the right size." She seemed satisfied with that answer, retreating to her room to play while I started dinner. Rice and vegetables, stretched with soy sauce and hope. As I chopped carrots, my phone buzzed. A text from my sister, Claire. "Saw Linda Crawford's Facebook post. She's really gunning for you lately. You, okay?" I didn't ask what the post said. I didn't need to know. The mockery, the pity, the subtle suggestions that I was failing as a mother. I could imagine it all. "I'm fine," I typed back. Used to it, but I wasn't fine. I was tired of being the town's object lesson. Tired of watching Emma absorb the message that we were less than. Tired of the constant equation of stretching dollars and dignity. What Linda and Diane and their circle didn't know, what nobody in Riverside knew, was that I'd been planning, quietly, carefully, for 3 years. I'd been building something, saving every spare dollar, taking online courses after Emma went to bed, networking with suppliers, designing and creating. Mrs. Chen knew some of it. She'd been helping, actually, in ways I was only beginning to understand, and in 6 months, everything was going to change. But that night, eating rice and vegetables across from my daughter, I let myself feel the weight of their mockery one more time. I let it settle into my bones, fuel mixing with fire. They wanted to see me as small. Let them. The higher you think someone has to climb, the more shocking it is when they're already standing at the summit. 3 months later, the invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. "Marcus Thorne and Catherine Whitmore request your presence at their wedding celebration." I stared at it for a full minute, trying to decode why my ex-husband would invite me to his wedding. We barely spoke except about Emma's custody schedule. Our interactions were cordial but distant. Like acquaintances who once knew each other's secrets but had since forgotten the language. "They probably sent it out of obligation," Claire said when I called her. "Yes," I said. "I think I finally am. Isn't everything?" She said it so matter-of-factly, I had to laugh. Claire drove me to the Riverside Manor, the same venue where Marcus and I had said vows that lasted less time than it took to pay off the wedding costs. The circular driveway was packed with expensive cars, And I recognized faces from the auction 3 weeks ago, people who'd looked at me with new eyes, who'd stopped seeing the struggling single mother and started seeing the designer. "You've got this," Claire said as I stepped out. "Remember, you're not here for them, you're here for you." The ceremony was elegant, bordering on ostentatious. Catherine looked beautiful in a designer gown that probably cost more than I'd made in the last 6 months. Marcus stood at the altar looking older than I remembered. Gray threading his temples, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when we were married. I felt nothing. No jealousy, no longing, no regret, just a mild curiosity about the man I'd once loved enough to build a life with. What I did feel was the weight of stares. Linda Crawford sat 3 rows ahead, turning every few minutes to glance at me. Diane whispered something to her husband. Jessica Worthington's eyebrows were practically in her hairline. They hadn't expected me to come. And they certainly hadn't expected me to look like this. The reception spilled onto the Manor's terrace, where strings of lights created artificial constellations and champagne flowed like water. I nursed a single glass while navigating small talk with people who'd ignored me for years. "Sarah, I didn't know you were coming." That was Marcus, appearing at my elbow with Catherine on his arm. Up close, she looked younger than her photos suggested, maybe 28, with the confidence of someone who'd never struggled for anything. "You sent an invitation," I said simply. "Well, yes, but," he seemed flustered. "I didn't think you'd actually." "Catherine, this is Sarah, Emma's mother, the famous designer." Catherine extended her hand, her smile genuine. "I've been following your story since the auction. That jacket was incredible. Thomas Blackwell doesn't bid on anything unless it's exceptional." Famous designer. The words felt surreal. "Thank you. And congratulations on the wedding. Marcus told me you two parted on good terms." "I'm glad. Blended families work best when everyone's civil, don't you think?" There was no malice in her voice, no territorial possessiveness. She seemed genuinely kind, which somehow made everything more confusing. "We are civil," I agreed. "Emma's happiness is what matters." Marcus looked relieved. "Exactly. That's exactly right. Listen, Sarah, I've been meaning to talk to you about increasing my time with Emma. Now that Catherine and I are settled, we can discuss that later." I interrupted gently. "This is your wedding day. Enjoy it." As they moved on to greet other guests, I felt a strange lightness. Marcus wasn't the villain in my story anymore. He was just a man who'd made choices, same as me. The difference was that my choices had forged me into something stronger, while his had led him here. Comfortable, conventional, safe. The real drama began during dinner. Linda Crawford stood to give a toast, champagne glass glittering in her perfectly manicured hand. She spoke about love and partnership, about the importance of choosing wisely, about how wonderful it was to see Marcus finally find happiness with someone who matches his ambition. The implication was clear. I hadn't matched his ambition. I'd been the weight holding him back. But instead of shrinking, I sat taller. Because Linda didn't know what I knew. She didn't know about the contract Thomas Blackwell had signed 3 days ago, agreeing to manufacture my first full clothing line. She didn't know about Margaret Stroud's gallery exhibition scheduled for next month, with pre-orders already exceeding my wildest projections. She didn't know that I'd been offered a feature in Portland Monthly magazine or that a boutique chain in Seattle wanted to carry my designs. Most importantly, she didn't know that Mrs. Chen was retiring next month and selling me threads and treasures for a price so reasonable it was basically a gift, with plans to expand the space and rename it Mitchell Designs. I'd kept it all quiet, waiting for the right moment, and sitting there, listening to Linda's backhanded praise of Catherine while subtly disparaging me. I realized, the right moment was now. "Excuse me," I said, standing. "I'd like to say something." The table fell silent. Marcus looked alarmed. Catherine looked curious. Linda's smile froze on her face. "I want to thank Marcus and Catherine for inviting me today. Divorce is never easy, but it can be handled with grace and mutual respect. What many of you don't know is that when Marcus and I split, I was devastated, lost. I felt like a failure." I could see heads nodding, people remembering. This was the Sarah they knew, the cautionary tale. And for a long time, I let that failure define me. I let the whispers, the pitying looks, the casual cruelties, convince me I was less than. That being a single parent made me somehow insufficient. Linda shifted uncomfortably. Diane stared at her plate. "But failure is only permanent if you choose to stay on the ground." Over the past 3 years, while juggling motherhood and working full-time, I've been building something, creating something, not to prove anything to anyone, though I won't pretend validation doesn't feel good. but because I needed to prove something to myself. I took a breath, feeling the power of truth. Next month, Mitchell Designs launches officially. My clothing line will be manufactured by Blackwell Industries and distributed across the Pacific Northwest. Margaret Stroud's gallery is hosting a trunk show that's already sold out, and I've been invited to show my collection at Portland Fashion Week in August. The silence was absolute. Marcus's mouth hung slightly open. Catherine's eyes were wide with genuine admiration, but it was the faces of Linda, Diane, Jessica, and Pamela that I focused on. Shock, transforming into something uglier. Resentment. I'm sharing this not to gloat, I continued, but because there might be someone here who's going through their own hard time. Someone who feels like they're drowning while everyone else swims effortlessly. I want you to know, you're not drowning. You're diving deep. And sometimes you need to touch the bottom to push yourself back to the surface. I raised my glass. So, here's to Marcus and Catherine, to new beginnings, and to the truth that we're all more than our worst moments. Congratulations. The applause was thunderous. People stood, glasses raised, and I saw tears in more than a few eyes. Catherine crossed the room to hug me, whispering, "That was beautiful, thank you." Marcus approached more hesitantly. "Sarah, I had no idea. You never said anything. You never asked." The truth of that statement hung between us. In 4 years of co-parenting, he'd never once inquired about my dreams, my goals, my life beyond Emma. I'd been a logistical problem to solve, not a whole person with aspirations. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have been more present, not just as Emma's father, but as I don't know, as someone who once mattered to you. You did matter, but that chapter's closed, Marcus, and I'm okay with that." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and business card exchanges. People who'd ignored me for years suddenly wanted to connect, to collaborate, to invest. I collected contacts politely, but without desperation. I didn't need them anymore. I'd built something real on my own. As I prepared to leave, Linda Crawford intercepted me near the coat check. "That was quite a speech," she said, her voice tight. "Just the truth. The truth." She laughed bitterly. "You want the truth? Sarah, you think you've won something here, but you're still the same person. One moderately successful clothing line doesn't erase years of what?" I interrupted. "Years of what, Linda? Struggling, surviving, being the target of your casual cruelty." "I was never cruel. I was honest." "You were cruel," I said flatly. "You and Diane and your entire circle used my hardship as entertainment. You mocked me in grocery stores, excluded me from gatherings, and made sure everyone knew I was beneath you. And you know what the saddest part is? You did it because it made you feel superior. Because if I were a failure, you could feel like success." Linda's face flushed. "That's not, it is. But here's the thing I've learned. Linda, your opinion doesn't define my worth. It never did. I gave you that power, but I'm taking it back." I smiled, and it was genuine. "So, thank you for being the villain in my story. Every hero needs one to push against." I left her standing there, speechless, and walked out into the warm May night, feeling lighter than I had in years. Emma was still awake when I got home, curled up with Claire on the couch, watching a movie. "How was it, Mommy?" "Interesting. Your dad's new wife seems nice. Did you tell everyone about your secret project?" I'd been calling it that for months, and Emma had adopted the language enthusiastically. "I did. It's not a secret anymore." "Good," she yawned, snuggling closer to me. "Secrets are heavy. I bet you feel lighter now." Out of the mouths of babes. Indeed. That night, after Emma fell asleep, I sat at my sewing machine in what used to be a corner of our tiny living room, and would soon be my actual studio. I had 6 weeks until the gallery shows, a manufacturing contract to finalize, designs to complete, and about 1,000 terrifying, exhilarating details to manage. But for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't afraid of the work. I was excited by it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Catherine. I know this is strange, but I wanted to say your speech tonight was incredibly moving. I hope we can be friends. Emma deserves to have all the adults in her life getting along. Also, I'd love to commission a custom piece from you. Something for fall. Are you taking orders?" I stared at the message, then typed back, "Thank you. I'd be honored to create something for you. Let's set up a consultation." Sometimes the strangest connections form in the most unexpected places. The 6 weeks leading up to the gallery exhibition passed in a controlled chaos of creativity and logistics. Thomas Blackwell's manufacturing facility became a second home. where I worked with textile engineers and production managers to translate my handcrafted designs into something that could be reproduced without losing their essence. It was harder than I'd anticipated. The jacket that sold at auction took me 17 days to create. The production team needed to make each piece in under 4 hours while maintaining quality. We ran dozens of prototypes, adjusted patterns, and tested materials. Fashion at scale is completely different from custom work, Thomas explained during one particularly frustrating session, but that's where the magic happens, making something beautiful accessible to more people. The philosophy aligned perfectly with my vision. I didn't want to create clothes only for the wealthy. I wanted to make things that real people, in real life, could actually afford and wear. Adaptive designs that worked for different bodies. Sustainable materials that didn't cost the earth. Beauty that was democratic rather than exclusive. Emma watched my stress levels with the concerned attention of someone who'd learned to read adult moods for survival. Mommy, are you scared? Terrified? Baby, but you're doing it anyway. That's what bravery is, being scared and doing it anyway. She considered this seriously. Then I think you're the bravest person. No. The gallery exhibition was scheduled for the last Saturday in June. Margaret Stroud had transformed her space into something between an art installation and a boutique, with my designs displayed like sculptures. Each piece had a placard explaining the design philosophy, the materials used, and the customization options. People need to understand what they're buying, Margaret explained. This isn't just fashion, it's a statement about inclusivity and sustainability. The day before the opening, I did a final walkthrough with Mrs. Chen, who'd been my silent partner through everything. I can't believe this is real, I whispered, touching a midnight blue coat that had started as a sketch in my notebook months ago. Belief is simply confidence dressed in different clothes, Mrs. Chen said. You stopped waiting for permission to exist. That's when everything changed. I never thanked you properly. For the space, the mentorship, the introductions. You thanked me by succeeding, by showing other struggling single mothers that their circumstances don't define their ceiling, by being exactly who you're becoming. The opening night arrived with the weight of accumulated dreams and fears. I wore a dress I'd designed specifically for this moment, deep burgundy with gold threading that seemed to glow under the gallery lights. Emma had insisted on helping me get ready, declaring herself my official style assistant. You look like a queen, Mommy. I feel like I might throw up. Queens probably feel that way too sometimes. Claire arrived early to help manage the crowd control we hoped would be necessary. The gallery opened at 7. By 6:30 there was a line outside. Sarah, Margaret said, her voice tight with excitement. We might need to implement a maximum capacity policy. This is beyond anything I anticipated. Through the window, I watched people gather. Some I recognized, faces from the auction, from around town, from my past. Others were strangers, drawn by the press coverage that had exploded over the past month. The local newspaper had run a feature. Portland Monthly had published its article early. Someone had posted about my story on a design forum that went viral. I was no longer just Riverside's cautionary tale. I'd become something else entirely. At 7 sharp, the doors opened, and the crowd flooded in. I stationed myself near the center of the gallery, available for questions but trying not to hover. People moved through the space with genuine interest, examining seams, testing the adaptive features, and reading the philosophy statements. Thomas Blackwell arrived with his wife, both of them beaming. Sarah, the pre-orders are already exceeding our first quarter projections. We might need to expand production capacity. Catherine showed up without Marcus, looking elegant in a simple black dress. He wanted to come, she explained, but thought it might be awkward. I told him he was being ridiculous, but she shrugged. Men, it's fine. I appreciate you being here. Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss this. Also, I brought friends. She gestured to a group of well-dressed women I didn't recognize. Colleagues from my firm. They're all very interested in your work. The evening became a blur of handshakes, compliments, and business discussions. People placed orders, requested custom consultations, and asked about wholesale opportunities. Margaret flitted around with a tablet, managing the chaos with professional grace. Then Linda Crawford walked in. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, surveying the crowded gallery, the obvious success, the transformed version of the woman she'd spent years diminishing. Diane was with her, along with Jessica and Pamela, the full quartet. The conversation around me didn't stop, but I felt their presence like a change in air pressure. Linda approached slowly, her expression carefully neutral. Sarah, this is quite impressive. Thank you for coming. I wouldn't have missed it. She glanced around, and I caught something in her eyes, not quite regret, but maybe recognition. I owe you an apology. The words hung in the air like smoke. Diane looked uncomfortable. Jessica and Pamela exchanged glances. I've been thinking about what you said at Marcus's wedding, Linda continued, about cruelty, about using your struggles as entertainment. You were right. I did that. We did that. She gestured to her friends. And I'm sorry. I could have been gracious, could have accepted with a simple thank you and moved on, but something in me, the part that remembered every cutting comment, every pitying look, every moment of casual cruelty, needed more. Why? I asked simply. Why what? Why did you do it? We grew up together. Linda, you babysat me. Our mothers were friends. What changed? She was quiet for so long, I thought she might not answer. Then fear, I think. You represented something terrifying. The idea that everything could fall apart. That marriage wasn't secure. That money could disappear. That we could end up struggling despite doing everything right. It was easier to make you the cautionary tale than to admit we were all vulnerable. The honesty surprised me. This wasn't the Linda Crawford I'd known, the one who wielded social power like a weapon. This was someone who'd looked at her own reflection and hadn't liked what she saw. And now, I asked, now I see that the real cautionary tale is what I became. Someone so afraid of falling that I pushed others down to feel stable. She met my eyes. You didn't just build a business, Sarah. You showed all of us what resilience actually looks like. And I'm genuinely sorry for not seeing your strength sooner. Diane stepped forward. We all are. Sorry. I mean, we were. She struggled for words. We were bullies. Sophisticated, well-dressed bullies, but bullies nonetheless. Jessica nodded, tears in her eyes. I have a daughter Emma's age. If someone treated her the way we treated you, I'd be furious. But we did that to you, while you were raising your child alone and working your heart out. We're truly sorry. I looked at these 4 women, the ones who'd defined Riverside's social hierarchy, who'd made me feel small and insignificant, who'd used my pain as gossip fodder. They stood before me now, diminished not by my success but by their own recognition of past cruelty. I accept your apology, I said finally. But understand, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let your actions define my future. I've moved past needing your approval or fearing your judgment. I hope you can move past needing to tear others down to feel elevated. Linda nodded, her eyes bright. Fair enough. And Sarah, the burgundy dress is stunning. Is it available for purchase? Despite everything, I laughed. It's a custom piece, but I can create something similar. I'd like that. Send me the details. As they moved away to examine the collection, Claire appeared at my elbow. Did that just happen? Did the 4 horsewomen of Riverside just apologize? Apparently, people can grow. Who knew? You're being very magnanimous. I'm being free, I corrected. Holding on to anger is exhausting. I'd rather put that energy into creating. Around 9, when the crowd had thinned to a manageable level, Emma arrived with my sister. She wore a dress I'd made her, lavender with butterfly embroidery, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged. She walked through the gallery slowly, examining each piece with the serious attention she brought to everything. When she reached the centerpiece, a coat I'd designed inspired by her drawing of a magic superhero cape, she turned to me with shining eyes. You made my drawing real. You inspired it, baby. This whole collection is for you, to show you that circumstances don't determine destiny. That being knocked down doesn't mean staying down, that we can create beauty even when life feels hard. Emma hugged me fiercely. I always knew you were magic, Mommy. Now everyone else knows too. Margaret announced that we'd exceeded sales projections by 300%. Thomas confirmed that manufacturing was prepared to scale up. Catherine placed an order for 4 custom pieces. And even Linda Crawford left with a consultation appointment scheduled. But the moment that mattered most came near closing time, when an older woman approached me hesitantly. Ms. Mitchell, my name is Patricia Gordon. I'm a single mother. Well, my daughter she's going through a divorce, has 2 kids, and she's drowning. I bought her tickets to your show next week, but I wanted to tell you. Her voice cracked. Your story gives us hope, gives her hope, that there's life after the hardest chapters. I took her hands. There is, I promise there is. Tell your daughter that the bottom isn't the end, it's the foundation. Everything you build from there is yours alone, and nobody can take it away. She left crying, and I realized, this was the real success, not the sales numbers or the press coverage or the apologies from former tormentors. It was knowing that my struggle and subsequent triumph, might light the way for someone else stumbling through darkness. 2 months later, Emma and I stood backstage at Portland Fashion Week, preparing for my collection debut. The Fashion Week organizers had given me a prime Saturday evening slot, and the venue was packed. Nervous? Emma asked, squeezing my hand, terrified. But doing it anyway. The lights dimmed, the music swelled, and one by one, models walked the runway wearing designs that represented every late night, every moment of doubt, every instance of choosing to rise instead of staying down. The final piece was the coat, Emma's superhero cape made real. As it moved down the runway, the crowd erupted in applause. I watched from the wings, tears streaming down my face, my daughter's hand in mine. This was vindication, not the petty kind that comes from proving critics wrong, but the profound kind that comes from proving yourself right, from believing in your own vision when nobody else could see it, from building something beautiful from broken pieces. Later, at the after-party, a young designer approached me. She was maybe 22, with nervous energy and a portfolio clutched to her chest. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm a single mom. Just started design school. Everyone says I should focus on being practical, that fashion is too competitive, that I should give up my dreams for stability." She took a breath. "But I read your story, and I thought, if she did it, maybe I can too." I looked at this young woman, seeing my younger self reflected back, the fear, the hunger, the desperate hope that there was more to life than mere survival. "You can," I told her. "Not maybe. You can. It won't be easy. You'll want to quit 1,000 times. You'll feel like you're failing when you're actually learning. But if you keep creating, keep believing, keep putting one foot in front of the other, you'll get there." "How do you know?" "Because I was exactly where you are. And look where I ended up." She hugged me impulsively, then disappeared into the crowd, clutching her portfolio like a treasure map. The drive home from Portland took 3 hours. Emma fell asleep in the back seat, clutching a program from the show. I drove through the dark with the radio playing softly, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me here. 4 years ago, I'd been sitting in a lawyer's office signing divorce papers, convinced my life was over, that I'd failed at the one thing society said mattered most, keeping a marriage together. I'd internalized every judgment, every pitying look, every cruel comment. But failure isn't permanent unless you choose to stay on the ground, and sometimes, hitting bottom gives you something to push against. I'd learned that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about what you build on the way back up. That success isn't measured by other people's approval but by your own growth. That being knocked down doesn't define you. How you rise does. Riverside appeared on the horizon, its lights twinkling like earthbound stars. This town had been my prison and my proving ground, the place where I'd been torn down and rebuilt myself stronger. As I drove through familiar streets, past the grocery store where Linda had mocked me, past the community center where my jacket had sold for $5,000, past Mrs. Chen's boutique, soon to be Mitchell Designs, I felt a profound sense of peace. They'd mocked me for being a single parent, called me a cautionary tale, used my struggles as entertainment, but in doing so, they'd underestimated something crucial, the strength that comes from having nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The truth had hit them hard, just like the title promised. But the truth wasn't about revenge or proving them wrong. The truth was simpler and more powerful. I was never broken, just bent. And bent things, when given time and care and relentless determination, often straighten into something stronger than they were before. 6 months after Portland Fashion Week, Mitchell Designs opened its flagship store in downtown Riverside. The grand opening drew crowds from across the state, covered by fashion bloggers and local news stations. Linda Crawford was one of my first customers. So was Diane Foster. Jessica Worthington commissioned a wedding dress for her daughter, and Pamela Shore hosted a trunk show fundraiser at her home, with proceeds going to support single parents in Riverside. They weren't perfect. Old habits die hard. And sometimes I'd catch glimpses of judgment in their eyes before they remembered to adjust their expressions. But they were trying, and trying counts for something. Marcus and Catherine had a baby, a boy they named Oliver. Emma loved being a big sister, spending weekends at their house, and coming home with stories about her baby brother's antics. Marcus had become a better father through distance, appreciating his time with Emma instead of taking it for granted. Mrs. Chen retired to a cottage by the coast, where she gardened and sent me fortune cookie wisdom via text message. Her final gift was the storefront, sold to me for exactly $1, and a promise to make beauty accessible to all who seek it. Thomas Blackwell's manufacturing partnership expanded beyond my wildest dreams. Mitchell Designs became known for sustainable, adaptive fashion that didn't compromise on style. We employed 30 people within the first year, most of them single parents looking for flexible work that paid fairly. And Emma grew up watching her mother build something from nothing. She learned that setbacks were temporary, that kindness was powerful, and that success was measured not by others' approval but by your own integrity. On the first anniversary of my gallery opening, I stood in my flagship store after closing, looking at racks of clothes that represented countless hours of work, failure, learning, and growth. My phone buzzed with a message from Patricia Gordon's daughter, the single mom I'd never met but whose tickets to my show had been a grandmother's act of hope. The message included a photo, a young woman standing in front of a food truck, wearing one of my jackets, with 2 kids grinning beside her. The caption read, "Starting my own business. Your story gave me courage. Thank you for being living proof that rock bottom can be a foundation." I saved the photo, adding it to a growing collection of messages from people whose lives had been touched by my journey. Not because I'd done anything extraordinary, but because I'd done the most ordinary thing in the world. I'd refused to stay down. The mockery had hurt, the judgment had wounded, the years of struggle had scarred, but those scars had become my foundation, the place where I'd planted seeds that grew into something beautiful, something that was entirely, authentically, undeniably mine. They'd mocked me for being a single parent, and in doing so, they'd underestimated the most powerful force in the universe. A parent fighting for their child's future. The truth hit them hard, but it set me free, and in the end, freedom was the sweetest revenge of all.